So we're really happy to have you here today. And this has been an exciting experience getting ready with the team, not only our presenters, Bob and Tom, but the other people on the team that have worked together to put this together. Barbara Lopeman, lady with a clipboard, you probably know her. Sandy McBride, who is here somewhere, you probably know her as well. She wrote the article that you're going to hear about at the end. As we get towards the end of the tour, okay, we're going to stop at the Overlook here, and then Sandy is going to talk and tell you a little bit about the Field of Dreams. Okay, so that's an important thing as well. We wanted to be able to invite you to stay as you run towards your car to talk to Sandy a little bit. So our presenters today are Tom Salvadore. Does anybody here know Tom? Okay. We will. You will now. You'll be on the video, you know. And Bob Murphy. Bob Murphy, I was told today, is the volunteer expert for Mechanicville. If you need anything done, he's your man. So it's been great working for them, and I'm going to turn it over now, I think, to the man that's going to talk about the first monument and the first location, Elmer Ellsworth. So thank you. Got it.
So welcome to Hudson View Cemetery, which is actually owned by the Mechanicville Cemetery Association. It's been here since the late 1700s. It's about approximately 73 acres. I'm the chairman of the building and grounds for the cemetery. I've been doing that for over 35 years. But when I started, we had 4 employees. And financially, things changed with anybody that's got money in the stock market and bonds. Years later on, they didn't produce a lot of money, so we lost to one man. So I just want to introduce to my left, your right, on the Kubota, Jim Doty is the caretaker here. He's a one-man operation. He's very fortunate to have a family of at least 2 sons, a daughter, and some grandchildren that's actually helped us to maintain this cemetery. As being a cemetery with this much acreage, it's difficult to catch every spot all the time. So we do get some people that'll say, gee, I went up and there's a lot of weeds or something. And we say to them, well, we'll get to it eventually at one time. But this cemetery is in the exact same shape today as it would be any Memorial Day, which is the featured day for cemeteries. More people visit cemeteries on Memorial Day weekend than any other day of the year. So we're in front of Colonel Elmer E. Ellsworth. Think about 24 years old, he dies, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about him. And I think about that as being a 24-year-old, all the different things that he did in those 24 years. He was born in Malta. He grew up in Mechanicville. Then he went to New York City for a short time and then moved to Rockford, Illinois, when he was a young boy. He studied Zouave soldiers, which were French colonial troops in Algeria. He just had it. He loved that. He was a drill master for the Rockford Graves. He loved military science, and he helped train military units in Milwaukee and Madison, Wisconsin, which helped him become a nationally recognized drill master. In 1959, he moved to Springfield, Illinois, to study law. In 1960, he studied law in Abraham Lincoln's office and was befriended by Lincoln, and Lincoln treated him as a son. In 1960, he accompanied Lincoln to Washington after Lincoln was elected in 1861. In April of 1861, the Civil War breaks out, and Ellsworth helps recruit soldiers for President Lincoln by forming the 11th New York Volunteer Infantry Regiment, the Fire Swabies, from the New York City Fire Department. He and Lincoln observe a large rebel banner in Alexandria, Virginia, across the river at the Marshall House. It was owned by James Jackson. As Ellsworth entered the Marshall House with 7 men, they met a disheveled-looking man claiming to be a boarder. They continued up the stairs, removed the rebel flag. As Ellsworth came down the stairs with the banner, he was shot in the chest by the boarder, who was actually the owner, James Jackson. Jackson was immediately bayoneted by one of Ellsworth's men, and that guy was from Troy, New York. Each man became martyrs for their respective sides, with Ellsworth becoming the first Union officer to die in the Civil War. Lincoln was saddened over the news of his friend Ellsworth's death and ordered an honor guard and to bring the body to the White House, where he would lay in state in the East Room. Now, I go to mortuary science school, become a funeral director. In one of my classes, I have to do a report on embalming. So, President Lincoln reaches out to the Surgeon General and asks him to find somebody that can preserve his friend Ellsworth's body so he could stay at the White House. At that time, people in the Civil War in deaths, if they died and were going to travel anywhere, they either put them on ice or, as you figure, they were buried where they died. The Surgeon General found a Dr. Thomas Holmes, who had been experimenting with arterial embalming or arterial work using salts and different preservatives. They preserved Ellsworth. He was able to lay in state in the East Room. He also was in the Capitol. He then traveled to New York City, where they had a ceremony. Then he was brought by train up to Albany, and then the train to Mechanicville, and an entourage brought him from the train station to here where he's buried. On the side of the memorial, it tells that the New York City Fire Department was involved in erecting this 25-foot monument. On the top of the monument is a bronze eagle. Back in the late 80s, early 90s, it was stolen. Somebody actually got up on top there, stole it, and threw away. And for 2 years, the police department, with all police all over, put out bulletins looking for that eagle. And they actually, it's a 300-pound bronze eagle. I'm sorry, 1997. I didn't look at it. No, 97. It was stolen. December of 97, a notice with a photo was posted on the internet by the Sons of the Union Veterans of the Civil War. In a matter of days, the Atlantic Gallery in Massachusetts notified them that they had the eagle. The eagle was returned to Mechanicville in January of 1998. Elmer Ellsworth, Colonel Elmer Ellsworth. Hey, I couldn't tell you how many times we told that story because Mechanicville, what are you going to talk about? So they said, we had the first Union officer killed from the Civil War. Look at people. Really? So, Colonel Ellsworth, his horse is buried in the back. and along with his parents and family. And that's Colonel Elmer E. Ellsworth. I want to say one other thing. This isn't in print. Thought I saw the mayor here. Do I see him here? He had to leave. Well, he lives on Ellsworth Avenue. He owns 5 or 6 of the residents there. And we keep calling him 1 or 2 more, and they're going to change the name to Butler Boulevard. Carl Ellsworth, may he rest in peace.
Good morning. Our next monument we're going to discuss is Jacob St. John Ladow. It's the darker gray obelisk in the back. He was an early industrialist in the window, sash, and blind industry. He was born in Milton, Saratoga County. He was married twice. His first wife was Eliza Ann Denton, cousin of Elmer. And his oldest son was D.E. Ladow, who we'll talk about later. He moved to Ballston Spa as a young man and began manufacturing sash and blinds by hand. That was the only method at that time. Being an inventive person, he devised machinery to make the sash and blinds. His improved methods were successful and brought him to Glens Falls. He developed a center discharged water wheel made of wood, which in later years developed into the jovial turbine wheel, and he also patented a door clamping machine and other woodworking devices to help. He moved to Mechanicville in 1864. He manufactured doors, sashes, and blinds. The business grew into a large industry, and it was located between First Street, which was then Front Street, and Central Avenue, which at the time was the canal. So it's just north of where the Cumberland Farms is now, or back in the 60s and 70s, it was the city garage. After a few more years, he became deaf, and he got out of the business, and then he moved to Washington, D.C., to be with the oldest son of his second wife. His name was Robert, and they opened up a lumber business, which was very successful at that time. Hahn returned to Mechanicville in 1874. His interest in Mechanicville's progress was well known, and his input was sought after until his death in 1900. Our next site is the Hem Street site. It's the next tall obelisk there. That is for Henry Hem Street. He's a landowner, and his two-time great grandfather was Charles Hem Street, who sold his land in what was known as Watervliet at the time, but that was before Cohoes was a city. So it was really the land on the Mohawk, which is now the industrial site for the city of Cohoes. So when he sold that, he bought 146 acres of land across the river from Mechanicville. His daughter, Jenny Hem Street Van Vechten Cook, subdivided one of the family farms just after the 1900s, and she named it Hem Street Park. The lot sold for $65 to $75, with $3 down, 50 cents a month, with no interest and no mortgage. Now Jenny had a son, Theo Van Vechten. He was a World War I pilot, became a test pilot after the war. He flew in an air show over the Army-Navy football game in September of 1921. Later that month, he flew home, and he arrived during a baseball game that was held behind the Mechanicville High School at the time on Main Street. And he performed fancy stunts, as they called them back in the day. And then he landed the plane on the Mechanicville golf course. And it is reported that kids by the hundreds and automobiles by the dozens poured over the bridge to see the plane. Unfortunately, the Saratogian of April 9th, 1924, reported that Lieutenant Van Vechten fell 2,000 feet to his death doing a similar air show in McCook Field in Dayton, Ohio. Probably my favorite location in the cemetery. Colonel Ellsworth is the most famous. We'll talk about Frank Bryan, who has the largest. But this site is just, I came here one day just to help out, and I just saw it was pretty roughed up. And after I started to uncover things, I started to look around. And so we got a slate walkway to Louis E. Smith and his wife Phoebe. And then at 3 o'clock, or whatever clock it is, 3, 6, and 9, there's slate walkways to other family members' graves. The raised bed, I'm thinking, who was this guy? And I start to look around, and if you can see the cement pillars that they would have had a chain around, that I think of like at Arlington. And then I came here one night at 6 o'clock, and the sun just came straight out. And if you look, there's a circle of oak trees. I said, who designed this place? This guy, and this must have cost a lot of money way back when. So I started looking at about Louis E. Smith. He's an early industrialist in the linen thread industry. He was born in Stillwater in 1815, and he passed away in 1887 at the age of 71. He was educated in Wilbraham, Massachusetts from 35 to 38. He married Phoebe Peters of Clifton Park in 1839. He farmed the land in Half Moon until 1852, when he purchased stock in the American Linen Thread Company in Mechanicville, which held the only patent in the linen thread business in the United States. His business was located on North Main Street at the mouth of the Tenendahowa, and he was in charge in 1853, just a year later. Mechanicville was referred to as the borough prior to 1859. And the borough was half in Mechanicville, or half in Stillwater and half in Half Moon, and it was split by the Tenendahowa. In 1859, the village was incorporated by the county, Lewis's father, Lewis, was the first president of the Board of Trustees of the village. Louis E. became president in 1869, and again from 1872 through 78. Population grew from 977 to around 7,000 within the village during his time. He organized a fire company bearing his name in 1859, followed by a more formal fire company, the Washington Hose Company No. 1. He sold the American linen business to a firm from Massachusetts in the late 1880s. And he lived on South Main Street in the Smith Mansion, which is 148 South Main Street. For local people, that was the house that there's a Kay Waldron and Carl Scambatti owned. There's the black wrought iron fence in front. So that was his house. And when we finish, you can barely see his house from the view that we'll take at the end. Okay, the large monument is for Reverend Daddis Ensign Jr., born in 1783 and died in 1853. He was born in Westfield, Mass. The Methodist Episcopal Church licensed him in 1803 to be a minister. In 1808, he was appointed to the Albany Circuit. He was a father of 12 children. And in 1822, his health began to fail, and he arrived in Half Moon in 1827. One of his sons is John Wesley Ensign, that was born in 1814, died in 1900. He was born in Cambridge. He was married twice, but his first wife was Mary McClellan. And for there used to be a Mary McClellan Hospital. I haven't been able to trace it to him, but she was born in Greenwich. He was born in Cambridge. And I just, so that was just something I thought of when I was researching this. And John Wesley was a past president of the village board of trustees, and he was also an organizer of the Mechanicville Academy, which was one of the early schools. One of the 12 was a daughter named Angeline Ensign Newman. She was born in Stillwater in 1829 and died in Jerusalem in 1909. She was the husband, or she was the wife of Bishop John Newman. And after his death, she was deeply interested in a foreign ministry of kindergarten-age children. And upon her death, she set up a trust fund of $63,000 for a church and a school in Jerusalem. So that's 1909, and it was $63,000. I don't know what that translates to today. Now, her husband, Bishop John P. Noonan, was born in 1826, died in 1909. So I'm sorry, died in 1899 at the age 22. He was born in New York City. He was a pastor and served in Albany and Troy and in New York City. Both the Ensign and Newman families were associated with the 1828 Methodist movement in Mechanicville. Well, I didn't know there was a Methodist movement, but during the Civil War, the Methodist Church became divided also north and south. He was called upon to travel to the Deep South to work at bringing the church back together, and he met with much success. Following the Civil War, President Grant recruited him to be his pastor, and while Grant was suffering with throat cancer, and and eventually passed away. He was an honored guest and speaker at the president's funeral. He was Bishop Newman was twice elected chaplain to the U.S. Senate from 1869 to 1874. He was elected bishop in 1888, and he passed away on July 5th, 1899. And we have a Newman Avenue, and we have a Ensign Avenue. I'm assuming, I don't know, but probably it's a coincidence. Yeah. Any questions?
They all the church.
I believe they are. And children and in-laws and family. If you look at the old historical maps of Mechanicville, and I think there's an 1884 map and there's like an 1890. If you scroll to the cemetery section of Mechanicville, you'll see that these two, that one down there and this one, have circular markings on those maps, and you knew that these people were somebody back in the day.
We're at the Howland graves. Louis Howland, he owned a farm a couple miles west of Mechanicville. He was a grocer, a storekeeper, and he owned a valuable landowner. He was married to Alida Hemstreet. You hear that name Hemstreet a lot so far, haven't you? And he was the owner of Howland Grocery on North Main Street. He resided at 122 North Main Street, which later on was the rectory of St. Paul's Church. He's the father of William L. Howland. William L. Howland was educated at Mechanicville Academy and joined his family grocery business. He was the originator of the Manufacturers National Bank and was president for 33 years until they closed in 1931. He also was an organizer and owner of the Cary Brick Company. You're going to hear a lot about brick in the next 2 or 3 people. He was involved with the organization of the Half Moon Light, Heat, and Power Company, which was absorbed by the Associated Gas. I can remember my parents always talking about the Associated Gas and Electric Company, which I believe today is part of the New York State Electric and Gas. He served as president of the village. He was also a fire chief. He was a charter member of the Rotary and a director of the Mechanicville Cooperative Savings and Loan Association. He was active in the Methodist Church. He was a past president, treasurer, and a member of the Board of Trustees. The W.L. Howland Chemical Engine Company number 5 of the Mechanicville Fire Department had been named for him. In that, I'm going to go off script for a second. The Howland number 5 fire company was the first and only fire truck that was on the wrong side or the right side of the tracks. The Boston and Maine Railroad would intersect and cut off a third of Mechanicville before they made the overpass. And so in the early 70s, late 60s, they built a firehouse over on Vial Avenue, and guys that lived over there, and I was one of them, were members of that fire company. So if there was a fire on that side of the tracks, in the old days, the Mechanicville Fire Department would have to go up to Stillwater and come down Brickyard Road and take quite a while to get to where they were going. So that was firehouse. He lived in Talmadge Place, one of the most beautiful old homes in Mechanicville. They have slate roof, that the slate is that thick. Got beautiful, just a beautiful home. Her son Louis Smith, Louis Howland, married a daughter of Holman Gaffers, and they owned Tilly Ladder, which was a large business in Watervliet, and he became the president of Tilly Ladder. He donated to the Methodist Church a Howland Memorial window in memory of his parents on North Main Street. The Methodist Church has a beautiful, beautiful stained glass window. It was designed by a fella in Philadelphia, and it was made by a glass cutter in Boston. We talked about brick, now we're going to talk about it quite a bit. Miles Duffney, 1871 to 1935. Miles was just one of the many brick manufacturers in the area. Once the Hudson River Water and Paper Company got permission from New York State to build a dam for their business, the need for brick was born in Mechanicville, and that's in 1882. Horace Medbury opened the first kiln in 1883. 40 workers, primarily Italian heritage, turned out 40,000 bricks a day. In 1886, the Mechanicville Brick Company won the contract to supply New York City's aqueduct with 12 million bricks. In 1894, the Best Brick Company was formed, and by the turn of the century, 6 other brick companies were in our area. Champlain Brick Company, established in 1897, along with other companies, used the railroad and the canal system to grow their business. These companies provided brick to New York City and the Boston area, along with Albany, Schenectady, Troy area during the time for not only new construction, but for ongoing maintenance of streets and highways. And I remember, I'm old enough to remember, I lived on Railroad Street, and it was a brick street. It's beautiful. It was in great shape. Unfortunately, as the city and the electric and gas company had to go into the streets to put in new water hookups and sewage hookups, the streets got to be like this. But when they repave and they take off the old pavement, you'll see the brick still under there. All the streets were basically brick here in Mechanicville. And that is Miles Duffney.
Okay, we're at the family of the, we're at the gravesite of the Duncan family. As we all grew up, we will always know Mechanicville. What was the nickname of Mechanicville? The Paper City. Well, here's the Paper City right here. Duncans were born in Scotland. They emigrated from Scotland and learned the paper making at a young age. They worked his way up to up the industry after arriving in the United States in 1860. The Hudson River Power and Paper Company came to Mechanicville in 1882 to provide power via the newly built dam to local businesses and to begin paper production to take advantage of Mechanicville's close proximity to New York City and the old New England companies using the Hudson River and the trains. Paper portion of the business separated from the power portion, with Thomas Duncan leading the way. He became treasurer and superintendent in 1885. In 1895, the company changed its name to the Duncan Company and was claimed to be the largest paper-making company in the country in 1896. John C. Duncan, who studied paper making in Europe, joined the company
and which allowed his company to draw on the collective expertise of producers worldwide. Upon the death of his father in 1901, he was promoted to treasurer and general manager of the company. Nationwide, mergers in many industries began in the 1890s. The Duncan Company was sought after because of the rail and canal connections, robust power plant, and proximity to the great Adirondack forest. People remember the wood pile in Mechanicville. It's where the supermarket is now, Price Chopper. Used to be huge piles of wood that came in every day on rail and on truck. In 1904, the Duncan Company was sold to the West Virginia Pulp and Paper Company for $3 million in 1904. And they ran the business under West Virginia Pulp and Paper, and then changed it to West Vaco until they moved out in 1971. We had over 1,200 people worked at the paper mill. It was a great place to work. They made good money. The union was good. Things were well. But in the middle 60s, the state and the federal government said, you got to stop dumping your waste in the Hudson River. And they estimated that a water treatment plant would be about $3 or $4 million. Now think about that in the 60s. That'd be like $50 million today. So the paper mill wasn't happy with that, number one. Number two, the company wanted to make more paper. It had one of the finest papers in America. And unfortunately, it was an old plant, and they couldn't make any more. And they didn't have the room to expand. That was strike number two. Strike number three happened to be union and labor unrest. They had a bad strike in the 50s, they had a strike in the 60s, and they were going to have a new contract in the 70s, and West Vaco said, we're out of here. And they actually moved to White Cliff, Kentucky, and they got a 20 or 25-year abatement of taxes, and it was a non-union shop. So it was a pretty easy move. Some of our leaders and some of our people moved down to Kentucky, but most of them lost their jobs. And thank God, most of those people that lost those jobs were able to get other jobs through the Capital District. One of them was building the new South Mall. E.A. Collins, a graduate of Mechanicville High School and an engineering graduate at Union College, started his construction business in 1948. His office was actually a back room behind his mother's kitchen. His family helped him somewhat, but it was pressed in hard times. E.A. had a one-truck construction business, and he's gone on to earn the prestige, and he's gone on to earn all sorts of awards, including the Thaddeus Kosciuszko Bridge that was contracted in 1957. The Twin Bridges, as we know them, a landmark, won the most beautiful bridge award from the American Institute of Steel Construction in 1960. They also built miles of Route 87 Northway. D.A. Collins has been a leading company in bridge building, replacement, road construction, and rehab in the northeastern states. D.A. Collins, a company includes Kablicki Construction, Paletti Stone, and Jonta, Lime, and Galusha companies. They were headquarters for many years on Route 67, the Willow Glen Road, and moved to Ballard Road in Wilton. Hudson View Cemetery is grateful to have received funding from the Collins Family Trust. to keep this centuries-old cemetery alive and well kept. And D.A. Collins actually lived right behind us in the first street. It was called Dewey Avenue, at their last house. This is where he raised his family. D.A. Collins, he's a prolific career and a well-known builder, and they've been in business for 77 years. They have over 500 employees, and they have $100 million worth of equipment fleet. Pretty nice to be started right here in Mechanicsville.
Okay, this is the monument to D.E. Ladow, Daniel Edward Ladow. He's the son of Jacob St. John Ladow, who is our second person we talked about. He was a businessman and a community leader. He was born in 1839, and he passed away in 1901 at the age of 63. He was born in Saratoga Springs, educated in private schools in Glens Falls and in the Stillwater Academy. He worked with his father in the sash and blind business until 1863. At age 24, he went out on his own, and he went to operate the Troy Sash and Blind for a couple of years. He embarked on a knitting goods business in Waterford before starting the first knitting mill in Stillwater. In 1869, he came back to the family and became a member of the firm of Barnes and Ladow. He was a civic-minded person. He was a village clerk, trustee, and president in 1883. During his term, the steam fire engine was brought to Mechanicville, and it was organized it was given his name and his honor. I was a D.E. Ladow fireman in 1970 something. There was quarter beers back then. Yeah, that was the incentive. I say. He was a prominent organizer of and a deacon of the Baptist Church. He was the first president of the Mechanicville YMCA and held the office for several years. He was the first president of the Board of Education in Mechanicville, which he held also for 9 years, and was a trustee of the Mechanicville Cemetery Associations from its inception. And he lived on 90 South Main Street, which is right across the street of from the Dutch Gap. I remember Sibley's used to be there. It would have been right to the right of Sibley's. I believe it's owned by the Massarella family right now. Owns that. But if you notice, we've talked about the Howlands. Again, we're going to talk more about the Howlands at another stop, and the Ladow. So they were two kind of influential families in the early times of Mechanicville. Any question?
And the yellow fire truck in Mechanicsville.
And the yellow fire truck in Mechanicville. Yep. And I don't know if you remember, when I was a fireman, the firehouse is where City Hall is right now, where the Commissioner of Public Safety is, I think. On the left side of the building, there was a garage door there that the Ladow's truck was. And Barb and I's first apartment when we got married was in the 3rd floor. And on the other side of our bedroom was the horn for Mechanicville. You remember? So, you know what? It was bad enough when it was, I remember you pull the thing, and if it was box 29, it would be 2 blasts at 2, 9 blasts for 9, and they did it 3 times. But the worst one was when they only wanted 1 truck. It was 333. I don't know if you remember that. So that was 27 times that thing went off. And it was one wall away. Okay, we're in the Pryan section of the cemetery. This is Frank Pryan, businessman, gentleman farmer, and landowner. So he was born in 1818, and he died at 62 in 1880. He's a descendant of the Pryan family, the Albany Pryan family. He is the eldest son of Jacob Tonight Pryan and Nellie Knickerbocker Pryan of Rensselaer County. So he's not the descendant of the Pryans from Glens Falls, which had the Pryan lumber in Mechanicville. I always thought it was that, but that's not so. At age 45, in August of 1862, he was mustered in the Union Army as a captain in the 7th Artillery. He was captured in June of 64 in Petersburg, Virginia, and he was exchanged 4 months later on October 3rd of 1864, and then he resigned his commission in December of 64. So he was a large landowner of this area of Half Moon, and is the namesake for Pryan Hill. He owned a large lumber business, not Mechanicville, but in Brooklyn. And he reportedly lost $70,000 in the Great Waterford Bank robbery of 1872, where up to $500,000 was stolen. He never married or had any children that I was aware of, and so his brother John inherited the estate upon his death and is believed to have donated the land to expand the cemetery. So if you look at the 1800 maps, the entrance was where you come in today, but the road came right here. And it went to the old section, right? Which that roadway that we came in on is pretty much the boundary of the Mechanicville part of the cemetery, and anything to the right of that road is in the town of Half Moon. Okay. So, couple things. Luddy Amon, I don't know if you guys know Luddy Amon from town. He's done a lot of research, and I've read a lot of his stuff that can be found on findagrave.com. I get laughed at by my family because I'm on findagrave.com, and I'm reading all about, that's where a lot of the information I got came from. Also in the Mechanicville government website, there's a historian page, and Paul Lopman has written many articles, and some of the information I got from there. So there's a lot of stuff that can be, some of the stuff I copied verbatim just to have something to say at each site, but there's a lot of interesting reading. Jan Colarusso, a classmate, lived in Hem Street Park. I sent her the Hem Street Park thing. So there's a lot of information out there if you like history. So, any questions on Frank Pryan?
How did they have a lumber
business in Brooklyn, right?
there, or did you?
Well, they said, he traveled. They call it his gentleman farm in the town of Half Moon. And his house is like, if you go up towards the high school here, it's the one on the corner of Tucker Lane in Pine Hill Road. It's a gray house. They have a picture of that in the history of the town of Half Moon. That's another site that I would look at, and they show they got a portrait of Frank Pryan and a picture of his house. They also have Louis E. Smith's picture and a portrait of him and a picture of his house. So there's some sources if you're interested in doing some of your own research.
We're going to talk about Farrington Lewis Mead. He was a news editor and publisher. He was born in Burn Hills. He attended and graduated from Syracuse University, where he was an editor for 2 years, followed by a 4-year stint at the Syracuse Standard. He then purchased the Ilion Citizen in 1882. He came to Mechanicville in 1883 and purchased the Golden Era weekly newspaper and renamed it Mechanicville Mercury. And he was the editor until he retired in 1920. He purchased property, and you'll know this, property on the corner of North Main and Park Avenue that extended the canal. So for Mechanicville people, remember where Enzian's was, the drugstore. He owned all the way up to where Kaplan's was. That was his property. They had Powers Market. They had my Uncle Sal Rinaldi's shoe store. Then my Aunt Mary Manzo was the best salesperson. Yeah, Union Supply was also there, the Fitzpatrick's. During his time as the editor and publisher, he advocated for many improvements in the city. Central Avenue was a canal, and he advocated for building a lift bridge over the canal on Park Avenue. He organized the First National Bank. He was involved with the building of the Hudson River Bridge to replace the ferry. There used to be a ferry from the dock over to Hemp Street Park. When the Champlain Canal was closed, abandoned, for barge traffic, he advocated that the removal of the lift bridge, filling in the canal bed, which then became Central Avenue, the main artery through Mechanicville. He was a member of many of the social clubs in the city of Mechanicville, and he passed away at the Masonic Temple on Park Avenue. Now, I'm thinking he was maybe playing gin rummy, and maybe he ginned out. I don't know, but that's where he died. And that's Farrington Mead.
So, Job G. Vile, born in 1810, died in 1885, and he was 75 years old. He was a landowner, and one of his first purchases, he purchased land west of the city of Mechanicville, which was known as Willow Green, which became Willow Glen. After that purchase, he turned his interest to Mechanicville, and he bought the land north of the B&M, which are the tracks behind the old commercial hotel, all the way to Saratoga Avenue, which was called North Street then. Saratoga was North Street, and the area was known as North Mechanicville. He came to Mechanicville in 1931 as the superintendent of the Fairbanks and Bullen Cotton Factory, and then he purchased the land. He erected several homes and a grocery store. He was one of the original members of the Board of Trustees in 1859, and his residence was where Pryan Lumber's was, or right now the Davenport Estates is. You know, if you notice a lot of the stones are names of streets in town, right? We got Vile, we had Newman and Ensign. We have Howland Avenue. Howland Avenue currently is the bridge. You go over to Hempstead Park, that's Howland Avenue. The golf course's address is 25 Howland Avenue. But Howland Avenue also used to be from Elizabeth Street on 3rd Street. 3rd Street used to be Howland Avenue from Elizabeth to Park, and then it was Bradford from Park to the bottom of the hill. And at some point in time, when we talk about Mr. Talmadge, around his time, so there was Front Street, which is 1st Street. There was Hazel Street, which was 2nd Street. And 3rd Street was split between Howland and Bradford. And once we talked about Mr. Talmadge and what his donation was, we believe they renumbered the streets after that donation to the city. Any question?
Where did Mr. Biles get the resources to buy all of it?
He was, I'm not sure, Art, but he came, it seemed like he came from Rensselaer County, and I believe his family had a farm over there. So I think back then you had land farm. The farming community tended to be well off. The Hem Streets had farms. You know, there was, I think, well-to-do people, but I'm not exactly sure where he got all the cash.
Talmadge lot. William Talmadge was born in Scotticook. He was a justice of the peace. He was a hotel owner and land owner. Yeah. His hotel was formerly known as the Burnaps and later the Saratoga Hotel. Located on the east side of South Main Street, across from where the Dutch Gap was, as we talked about again. That's where Sibley's, and yeah. Later, it was destroyed by fire. It was never rebuilt, as the judge had let his insurance lapse, and as reported by Farrington Mead, so I never rebuilt there. The judge was he subdivided building lots that are known on the west side in the 1880s and 90s. He laid out numbered streets, then they turned those over to the Mechanicville Municipal Corporation. He had a private driving park, as you know, as Talmadge Park, where local horse races and baseball games drew large crowds of spectators and gamblers in the late 1800s, early 1900s. The judge donated the park in 1895 to the municipality, but the city wouldn't accept it until the park was truncated at the northern end, which was Park and 4th and 5th, so the area could be subdivided for new homes. William Talmadge donated the park, beautiful park, where we hold our Family Day celebrations every year around the 4th of July. And we also have, that's our new Veterans Memorial Park that used to be at the old high school that was moved up to the park. That's the Talmadge family.
This site right here is Sarah Bradford. She was 2 years old, and based on findagrave.com, this is the first grave in this cemetery. So unfortunately, you see the size of this tree, which used to be here. It fell and unfortunately did some damage to this area. We're at the family Howland plot. Now, this Howland name caught my attention a few years ago when Barb and I were in Algonquin, Maine. We were by the bushes, Kenny Bunkport house, and I just was curious, where did the Bushes get their money? So I did some research and looked into George W. Bush, and he's a descendant of John Howland, one of the passengers on the Mayflower. Mr. Howland was an indentured servant to Governor John Carver and was famously swept overboard during the storm, but managed to grab a rope and pull him back himself back on board. So I knew we had Howlands in Mechanicville. I just said, do we have a connection? And so my son, Bob, he was a former historian replacing Paul Lopeman. I asked him to do some research. And after some digging, we couldn't get a direct line to John Howland, to that John Howland anyways. But we did find something interesting. One of the Howland was a descendant of George Sewell, who was also a passenger on the Mayflower. So while we don't have a direct line to John Howland like the Bushes, the Howlands buried here are still connected to the Mayflower history just through a different branch. And the takeaway for me was, even a small place like Mechanicville, you can find deep ties to the early days of of America. Now, this is Samuel B. Howland. He's got a nice gate with his name on it. Now, this had these iron bars all the way across. You can see the indentations and on the different pillars here. Well, Samuel's father was Knowlton Howland. He's up front. And his father was Elijah Howland. He's got I don't know if because he's got a crown, he's the oldest guy, but that's as far back in Mechanicville we got. But it's his two-time great-grandfather who married Sarah Sewell, who I think was the two-times great-granddaughter of Mr. Sewell, who was on the Mayflower. So that's that's Mechanicville's connection to the Mayflower. So again, this was all findagrave.com. It's like going down, a rat hole. You click on one person, you click on the next, and that's it. What's that? People in the. We got Dick Van Dyke is a Sewell descendant. Jean-Claude Van Damme. Who is it? Is it Tom Cruise? Richard Gere. So in the Bushes, well, they got Franklin Delano Roosevelt. They got a little bit, more of a prestigious descendants than Mr. Sewell, but we'll take what we can get, right? So the other thing, what Jim mentioned, before we go over and talk about the Field of Dreams, Sandy's going to talk about the Field of Dreams. I mean, this is Hudson View. And the view from here, if you're out here, you can look south. You see the, southern part of the city. You used to be able to see the river, but the trees and more houses. I mean, you can see Louis E. Smith's house from this side. And if you go over to that side and look north, you can see Willard Mountain. You can, so you got some nice views if you got the time.
A number of years ago, there was a wonderful man in Mechanicville named Mike Sullivan who studied everything historic in town. And he told me about this bat hanging in the tree and asked me if I wanted to find out something about it. So I ventured to find out something about it. And it turns out that back in 1983, 84, and 85, this group of boys would come up here and play baseball in this open area. They had a wonderful time. Now, Jim Doty, whom we met earlier, was the caretaker back then also, believe it or not. And he said the boys were wonderful. They never left anything behind. They were very respectful. They didn't tip over any gravestones. They just had a good time playing baseball, just for the love of the game. That's why they were here. So I found this to be a fascinating story because how many cemeteries in the world have kids playing baseball in the middle of them? And we're sure that some of the spirits around here must have enjoyed it also. So just a little bit about this. Unfortunately, David Lopeman, who was one of the boys who played here, was supposed to speak today, but had an emergency at work and couldn't be here. So I wish David was here to tell us firsthand how it was playing here in this cemetery. But it is such, seeing all these historic sites today is just amazing, the memories that they stir up from this community. And now these boys, you'll recognize a lot of the names. They're very successful men. They have gone on to great careers. One of them was even a police chief, and his brother was the only one who's not with us anymore, and he's buried here in Hudson View, John Waldron. So this is a great memento of Hudson View Cemetery in the good old days when we played for the love of the game. Thank you.